As I started to learn more about sleep, I just started realizing that for so many people, it's an afterthought, but it's really like the core. I mean, we talk so much about nutrition and we talk so much about fitness, and it's like sleep is like the foundation of all of it.
Welcome to the Friends with Benefits podcast, an Arcadia production. This is the show all about how to grow in business, lead with purpose, and live with intention. We're your co-hosting couple. I'm Jason.
And I'm Sam. Welcome to the show, friends.
Hello, friends. It's Sam here. Before we get into today's episode, there's a few really exciting things going on within Arcadia that I wanted to share with you. One, this month in April, we are doing a leadership audit with all of our members in the constellation. And what this looks like is going through a deep dive of what's actually happening in your life. What sort of things are draining you? What sort of things are giving you energy? What sort of habits you have maybe accumulated over the last, few years that aren't necessarily serving you? And we're each calling out 2 commitments to the group throughout that work that we are holding each other accountable towards and moving towards actually becoming a better version of ourselves. The constellation is available at bearcadia.com, and we'd love to have you join us, even if it's just for a month, to see what kind of conversations and whatnot we're having. And then, of course, we have Arcadia Leadership Experience coming up this July, 27th through 30th, in Bozeman, Montana. It's an in-person retreat for 65 of the top go-to-market leaders. And it's a way for leaders to really unplug, to create intentional relationships, and to really learn. We have no PowerPoints, we have no booth halls, and really, we barely have any rooms. It's all outside, it's glamping. You're going to learn to fly fish, do yoga, and you're going to walk away with space and new relationships that you aren't going to get at any other conference. We'd love to have you there, arcadialeadershipexperience.com. It's funny because today's guest actually came from a constellation member. So Tina is in the constellation. Hello, shout out Tina. And she reached out to me the other day and was like, I need to introduce you to Kristen Rainey. Kristen is a formal Googler, if that's what we'll call them. She was on a team that ran all the food programs for Google, which is a cool story in and of itself. We talk a little bit about that. But she experienced extreme burnout throughout her time there and kind of noticed some things that needed to change in her life. And through experimenting with how to get over burnout and how to get better care of herself, she became obsessed with the concept of sleep. So much so that she started the North Star Sleep School, where she hosted courses, she did individual coaching. She even is hired by places like Google to coach their employees on how to sleep better. Because at the end of the day, when we sleep more, we are better at everything else. We're better leaders, we have more resilience, we have more power to think clearly and creatively. And so we're going to talk about that today with Kristen. And both Jason and I had some key takeaways. Even if you think you're good at sleeping, there's probably some things that you should change. This is a conversation that we have in the constellation pretty often, but we have never had anybody that has the actual expertise on it. So talking with Kristen today was so fun. I certainly learned something. I hope you do too. And one of the things that she said that really stuck with me is everybody thinks that they're good at sleeping because it's just an afterthought. When in reality, if you focus on it, it can change everything about the way you show up in the world. So without further ado, enjoy today's episode with Kristen Rainey, and we'll see you soon. Hey friends, we are back in person today, which is always an adventure. Today's guest is actually, the way that we came to be introduced is so fun too, because as we've talked about on this episode, Jason and I started a speaker series called Bozeman Nights. At Bozeman Nights, one of our Arcadia Constellation members, Tina, shout out to Tina, met Kristen and said, you need to meet Sam. And so we just went to coffee this week. And I was like, wow, yeah, Tina was so right. I think that you have so much knowledge that our listeners would love to hear about. So thank you for being here. We're so excited you're here.
Absolutely. Should be a great conversation, one that I know I need.
Yes, this has also been like a red thread that we've talked about a lot in the constellation, but nobody actually knows what they're talking about. So I'm really excited to have an expert on the show to kind of give us actual understanding of it. But today we're talking about sleep most specifically and all of the elements that go into it.
Will there be an active exercise in the middle of this podcast where like we take naps or get hypnotized or something?
We could. Anything is possible.
Actually, let's just this is so unscripted, but I am curious. Naps. What's your perspective on naps? Because I cannot nap, and Jason can fall asleep for 20 minutes and then wake up and be like a new person.
I'd say go with it. I think people are different. I think naps in general can be really helpful. I think the key watch-outs are making sure they're early enough in the day and that they're short enough. And so for some people, having a nap at 3 p.m. destroys their following night of sleep. And I'm one of those people. So I could take a nap at 1 or at noon and there's no problem. But if I take it later in the day, it destroys the following night. So
my nap window, for those curious, are 11 a.m. or 2 p.m. And I set my alarm for 21 minutes and 30 seconds.
Almost a daily thing.
Wow.
Pretty prolific.
And what do you do when you're here at Kiln? Where do you go?
That's why I don't work out if you're very working.
The truth comes out. The problem is,
tell me there's a wellness room.
There is a wellness
room. A lazy boy chair in there that I could use if I wanted to, but
I mean, there's a couch. You do sleep with the kids around, so I'm sure you could fall asleep. Okay, so let's take a lot of steps back to how you even got into this. But we were at coffee the other day, and you were telling me about the amazing work you were doing at Google, running a massive food operation. Which, when you hear Google and that, those two things typically don't go together. So I want to hear about that. So let's actually just start there before I ask you 6 questions in one.
Yeah, from 2013 to 2020, I was fortunate to work at Google, and I was part of a food team which ran cafes all over the world at Google offices as a perk for employees. So most of them, they all had lunch and they all had breakfast, and some of them also had dinner. So some of the offices where people were often working late at night, perhaps the New York office, because a lot of those people were having, meetings with the headquarter people on the West Coast. So
I've been in that office before.
Oh, you had at the New York office. Oh, great. Lucky you. That's one of the tastier places. So our team was running those cafes and a whole series of other programs associated, little coffee bars and little micro kitchen snack areas and a ton of events like food for meetings, et cetera, and catering, et cetera. So it was a huge program.
That's awesome and so cool because, like I said, I feel like that's not something that's often thought about, but the importance of that for performance and culture and all of the things that play into that are huge for an organization like that. So after this, or during this rather, you have shared that you worked towards burnout and you actually experienced burnout. So what did that look like for you? And how did that lead you to sleep?
Well, for a long time, I just ignored it. I was working a lot, but I was also really fueled by the work. It was just really exciting. I was working on sustainability and procurement for that program and got to work with chefs and leaders in different parts of the world on interesting issues. And so I was very engaged with the work. It was really exciting. But I would often start the week on a Monday and feel like I hadn't totally replenished the battery all weekend. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of kept going from 10% full to maybe I'd get up to 20, but then Monday morning I was starting basically at 20%. And I just sort of never fully recharged, but I just ignored it. I'm busy, I'm productive, I'm feeling great about things.
Were you working through the weekend or unplugging?
Often I would work through the weekends because sometimes I would have meetings in other countries. And so I'd often go early to get on that time zone and get a little bit of rest and sometimes to do other things and enjoy a new place. And then so that I'd be ready Monday morning. So weekends and weekdays were sort of all blurring together. But the key thing I realized when I finally figured out, I'm having a problem here is when on weekends when I was home, I couldn't actually do the activities that I normally did to recharge. So windsurfing and long distance biking at the time were things I was just doing a lot of. And I literally just felt like I'd been run over by a truck. And so that was the biggest red flag for me is when I couldn't actually do the fun things I normally did to recharge.
Okay. And so from this moment, walk us through what happens next. Did you actively say, I'm going to step away from my role and then how did we fall into this? Because you've become a sleep expert in this, time between now and then. How did that happen?
Yeah, it wasn't an overnight thing. I think initially it was meeting with a ton of doctors and doing a ton of lab work and trying to figure out, why do I feel so depleted? It felt like one of those things of like, when you have the flu or something, you might feel like you've been run over by a truck, but then a few days later, you're fine. This just didn't go away. So
It's persisted, huh?
it persisted. And so it was kind of a deep, dark hole of trying to figure out what was going on. And in the end, I found out, I was hypothyroid, which, would have happened regardless of whether I was at Google. I also found out I had a relapse of mono from, high school or whatever. And then my cortisol was all over the place. And so the basic gist is that I was sort of in fight or flight all the time, and our bodies don't like that. We need time to recharge. And
So essentially, your nervous system wasn't allowing you to actually relax or sleep. It was always at that spike mode where it was always on.
always on. Yeah.
How long did it take you to come to that conclusion with doctors? Because I feel like that could be a wild goose chase.
Oh, it was a wild goose chase. And all this time, I'm still continuing to work and be on airplanes all the time and continue to just, put my head down and keep going. And eventually, I did end up taking a leave of absence from Google. And so all this was sort of happening, all in 2019. Eventually, I just realized that, this was not a long-term sustainable lifestyle for me, even though the work I was doing was actually, ironically, like in sustainability. And yet I was not really taking care of myself.
Man, so 2019. So nobody could even pin you as a long COVID victim. This was
Not yet.
which I feel like many people would have been like, it's long COVID.
Right.
Move on from that. Okay, so you started to understand all this stuff about yourself, which I bet was a journey by its own. And then at what point were you like, I think it's sleep. I think I need to dive into this more specifically.
I don't know if there was one magical moment, but I was definitely reading a ton and just, trying to figure out what's going on and how do I fix this? And how do I get back to things as quickly as possible? And I think sleep was the major component, but I think also just learning how to cope with stress was, also up there. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it was one silver bullet, but it was really sort of a discovery process over months and trying to figure out. As I started to learn more about sleep, I just started realizing that for so many people, it's an afterthought, but it's really the core. I mean, we talk so much about nutrition and we talk so much about fitness, and it's sleep is the foundation of all of it. And so you can have whatever the healthiest version of your diet might be, whatever, kale, tofu, whatever you're eating, but still not be taking care of yourself and not getting enough rest. And without that, you really have a whole slew of issues. So
It feels very much kind of like a chicken and egg scenario, right? If your nervous system is spiked and it's not allowing you to sleep and you need to sleep, so how do you get to the point where you can actually get that proper sleep? Yeah, something's got to happen, right? So in order to sleep, the nervous system's got to kind of wane down a little bit, but you're already spiked and already there. So but simply the fact that you took time off, that allowed you to kind of begin to enter into that stage of rest better? Or is there something that you kind of found that worked for you?
I think a lot of it is being really disciplined at night about having a wind down routine and not getting back on the computer. So as an example, I used to often be on these work trips. I'd be in another place, often in a different time zone. We'd often have this great team dinner, of course, lots of alcohol, and then come back to the hotel room and then get back online. And, it's just so interesting. It's a funny coincidence as we're doing this podcast today, but last night was one of the first times in a long time that after dinner I went back on my computer. And I have a massive screen. It's a ton of blue light. It's, it's wonderful for working, but it also has a massive impact on stimulating my brain, not just in terms of the light, but just also having the content, having your brain working late at night. And I slept very poorly last night. And so it was just such a reminder of just, I can't go back to doing that ever again. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it's just having the discipline of having, a routine in the evening that helps you wind down, that doesn't involve a lot of stimulation, doesn't involve a lot of screens. And unfortunately, so many people now use screens as their wind down. That's their way after a busy day or after their kids or whatever. So many people, we were talking about this, Sam, the other day, so many people will spend, an hour scrolling on Instagram or TikTok or whatever they're doing. And so that is tough.
Yeah.
Probably the part where you guys went to skip through listeners because we're going to talk about some hard stuff, I'm sure. So
Yeah, we're calling you out.
yeah, I think the amount of people that actually like lay in bed and scroll to fall asleep is, and I did a lot of reading on this a couple of years ago. Matthew Walker and a bunch of other folks, Rich Roll, talk a lot about this and like the amount of like you mentioned blue light that we're allowing in, and like now all the study coming out around short form video and how it's ruining our brains, our ability to focus, think, sleep, and it's more addicting than alcohol and caffeine. And I was like, that alone, like, has to be the number one wrecker of sleep these days, either that or alcohol.
Sleep is such an elemental part of being human that you said it already here, that people just like, it's an afterthought. Like, well, I have to sleep, so I'll go do that. But the components that go into making or setting you up for a good night of sleep are pretty limitless. Can you talk about that? Like, I think it's really interesting how you were working in Google with sustainability and nutrition and food and all of that. And that's obviously a huge component of it, but there's many more, screen time being one of them.
There's so many different things to do and to avoid. And I guess just some of the things in the evening in particular, getting off of screens and also just getting your phone in a different room. So, that's one of the things that I really try to get clients to do is just find a charging station that's not in their bedroom, because it reduces the temptation to be looking at your phone in the middle of the night if you wake up at 2 a.m. And it reduces the temptation of lying in bed and scrolling as the last thing you do before bed. That is one. I think, alcohol is also just a total killer. It particularly has the most impact on our REM sleep, which happens late in the night, like in our early morning hours, but that's when we get most of our REM. And, the really interesting thing about that is one of the many things that REM does is really help us with resilience. And so, the impact of having even one drink before going to bed at night is that your REM is disrupted and you might not feel as resilient the next day. And so that could have, a huge ripple on family members, people around you, people at work, etc. Trying not to eat right before bed. That's also really helpful to try to give yourself a gap of like at least 3 hours. Trying to stay away from spicy food, trying to stay away from chocolate and other items that actually should have some caffeine. I mean, and if this is a total vice chaos, it smells
okay though, right?
That's another thing I did last night. I also had ice cream and then chip that has chocolate in it, and I know better. And this was like 9 p.m. After I did all the wrong things last night. I mean, this is like...
She was just making sure all this still stands true.
This is like a little test.
Okay, I want to speak to this. We talked about this at coffee, but Jason and I took like a year off from drinking last year, and it was great. The social aspect of it was an interesting experiment, but I wear my Garmin watch every day, and I cannot drink anymore. Like, I probably couldn't before, but it's pretty crazy. Like, I consider myself to be a decent sleeper. My average sleep score is 85 and above. And if I have a drink of any sort, it's 40 or below. It's wild. So I think if you're telling yourself that's not me, maybe look in the mirror a little bit.
I mean, people listening at home and may not be familiar with like the why behind like alcohol and blue light. Like, what is it about those two components that really affect and impact your sleep? They shouldn't be done 2 or 3 hours before sleep.
The blue light, it's delaying the onset of melatonin. And so it's both the blue light, but it's also just the activation of work or even something like a TikTok video. Our brain just starts to become more activated. And so it makes it harder for us to fall asleep that night. So I'd say that the blue light is probably impacting the beginning of our night's sleep, which is more of the deep sleep. And yeah, alcohol it disrupts the sleep architecture. And so often, it's a whole range of factors, but one of them is just the fact that it often makes us have to get up and pee in the middle of the night, which breaks up the night of sleep. And that's just one of the things. But I don't know if your Garmin is telling you your heart rate variability, but that's like another indicator of readiness. And, for a lot of athletes who are working really hard and practicing really hard, and then they're drinking at night, they're sort of they're sort of negating a lot of the gains that they've worked so hard on. So
that's interesting.
I haven't thought about it in the sense of like how it impacts your HRV, heart rate variability, but I guess that is true. It's like it's kind of almost spiking, dropping with the what we consider the benefits of alcohol, but really the negative side effects of alcohol in this case.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting, all these ways of collecting data. I mean, I used to use an Oura Ring for many years, and I love that. And I now use the 8 Sleep mattress pad, which is both cooling, but then it also provides data on an app in the morning. And so I get a lot of those stats. And it is really interesting just to see all the things that would impact HRV. And, eating a big meal really late at night would do it. That would lower your HRV. Having alcohol at night would lower your HRV. Having a lot of stress, so even just, mental, emotional stress could also lower your HRV. Or having, a huge workout or, late night hockey game, whatever, are those are going to lower your HRV. So there's a million ways to lower it.
We've mentioned all the sleep technology. Maybe sit there for a second. Like you wear the Garmin, Sam used to be an Oura wearer. Now I've only heard of this 8 Sleep bed. I've only heard of this bed on Rich Roll's podcast.
I think Tyler Calder uses one.
Does he?
Yeah.
Oh, I've heard it advertised. I'd like to hear more about the bed, but also like your thoughts around technology for tracking sleep.
Yeah, the 8 Sleep, I mean, and I have no affiliation, by the way, with 8 Sleep, but it's...
Podcast is not sponsored. Yeah.
Not yet.
If you have any contacts out there, let us know. We'll take it.
It's a mattress cover, and then it has a little attached sort of reservoir of water. And basically, I tell the app when I generally go to bed and when I generally get up in the morning and how cool I like the bed. And so it's really helpful for me because I like a lot of covers even in the summertime.
Same.
So it's really nice to be able to have that, but then also not completely sweat out of your bed. The other many features of it is that it also has like a vibration as a way to wake up in the morning, which is kind of nice to have that as opposed to just sort of as a slow increasing vibration of whatever time you want it to wake you up. And then it also is providing all this data that I can look at on an app on my phone. So a lot of similar data to what the Oura Ring was providing in terms of like telling me how much sleep I was getting, how much deep, how much REM, and HRV is another key stat that I really enjoy looking at. I've been really happy with both of them. I remember a few years ago, I'd been asked basically like of all the tracking devices, like which ones were most reliable and are these tracking devices actually, how good are they? I was asked. And so I did a lot of research on it. And what I found at that time a few years ago, and I don't know if it's still current, but basically it was that all of these tracking devices are really good at determining whether you're asleep or awake, but some of them are less precise about how much deep sleep versus REM, et cetera, that you're getting in terms of breaking down the phases of sleep. I think they're improving all the time. And my understanding is that Oura was really one of the most accurate. And this was a few years ago.
Do you find in your experience, the mattress to be more accurate than your Oura was?
No, not necessarily. Unfortunately, I wish I had both at the same time because I think that'd be really interesting to compare.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I think I've been equally happy with both.
My experience, I used to wear my Garmin I tried to wear my Garmin when I slept. The Sam does, tracks our sleep. And I remember a couple of times I woke up, I was like, man, I feel like I slept really good last night. I look at my watch and it was like, you slept poorly. You got a 50. I'm like, that's bullshit. I did not. So I stopped wearing it because I found like it just detracted what I thought I...
Ooh, you didn't like the data.
Well, no, so when I woke up, I was like, I feel like I slept really good. Then I looked at my watch and told me I did. And then all of a sudden, I was like, you know what? Maybe I did it.
But what would happen if you actually use that data to try to improve your sleep?
But what if my sleep was really good?
It wasn't.
Listen, it made me feel
It wasn't.
I think it's a really good point. I think it could go both ways because there's other times where you might have felt like you slept poorly and then you look at your data and your data says you did better than you thought. And I think sometimes it's easy, and I can say this about myself for sure, of just getting like way too obsessed with the data. And ultimately, you're the best judge. Like, how do you feel in the morning? That is ultimately like the best source of truth. So I think all the data is really great, but it needs to be taken with a grain of salt for sure.
Okay, so question on that though. Like, I'd be curious from all these conversations you've had, and you've worked with, a wide variety of people on this, like, is data the way that you work with people?
Absolutely. I think for me, it's less about, you have one horrendous night. Like, okay, I did have a horrendous night last night, and I actually think there were some interesting learnings. But the more interesting thing is over time. What are trends over time? Mm-hmm. So looking at stats through something like the Oura Ring or 8 Sleep or whatever your tracking device is, and seeing how different changes in your behavior during the day affect that. So for example, for me, last night, I was on the computer late at night, which I'm not normally, and that had an impact. I also had mint chip ice cream at 9 p.m., which I've been trying not to do that late at night, And that also had an impact because it's chocolate and sugar and, totally worth it. But those both had an impact. But, for example, how do people, when you think about like their exercise, when in the day are they exercising? Does that have an impact on their sleep over time? When they eat dinner, does that have an impact? Are they getting light on their eyes early in the morning? Like all these things can impact their sleep over time. So it's really looking at the trends and looking at the data together.
Okay, so then from that, like I think this conversation is really interesting. I'd be curious, anecdotally, unless you have actual stats on this, how many people think that they're a good sleeper and they're not?
Well, in my experience, way more people think that they are good sleepers, and then their data shows otherwise. For somebody who's not tracking their sleep, like one of the biggest surprises to a lot of people is they say, oh, I went to bed at 10 p.m. and I got up at 6 a.m., so I got 8 hours of sleep. But they actually got a lot less than that because most of us don't fall asleep the second our heads hit the pillow. And most of us do have a number of brief awakenings during the night, even if we don't remember. So most of us are getting less than we think.
Yeah, I find this so interesting because, we talk about this all the time. It's probably industry agnostic, but in the work that we do, tech, working harder and not sleeping is like a badge of honor for people. It like showcases that like, I care about my work and I'm important. But what are the long-term impacts of that? Because sleeping 4 hours a night is not serving you.
I think we become less efficient, as just one example, with less sleep. And so, there are leaders out there now, like Arianna Huffington as one, and others who are now, flipping the story and being public about how committed they are to regularly getting whatever it is, 7.5 or 8 hours of sleep or whatever it is a night. And I think one benefit is just how much more productive you can be. And maybe you can get done 2 hours of work in an hour instead of the opposite. Sometimes things get really extended when we're really tired. But I think it's also the way in which you then interact with the people around you. And all of us know what it feels like to be tired and cranky. And, it's just that whole resilience piece is just not there. I think it's so many different layers of benefit.
I think it's important, like in the work we do, and you said the resilience word twice, like I think people often overlook that quality and as a leader and like why that's so important, right? And where that actually comes from. If you're saying that it stems from, REM sleep and a good quality night's sleep, then like it becomes more important when they think about like how they're valuing that versus thinking that they're just, on the hustle.
Yeah, like how patient are they with their coworkers or their direct reports, like rest is huge for that.
I know a lot of people who could use a little bit more resilience, and I've never even thought about it from the perspective of needing more sleep in order to gain that. And to make we talk a lot about becoming a better person, to be a better leader, and resilience is a part of that, and how you become better for yourself. And now I feel like that's a missing piece of our talk track.
Somebody that's listening and is like, I'm fine on 5.5 hours of sleep a night. That's where I thrive. Give us your opinion on that.
Yeah, well, only 1% of the population truly does well on the recommended 7 to 9 hours. So there's some people who actually need more than 9 hours to truly thrive. Me, that's your story. But I would like flip the script, and I think this whole idea of like what can you get by on is not the right way to phrase it. I think none of us want to just get by. We want to actually thrive and like be the best people we can be the best at our jobs, or I would hope so. And so, I think flipping the script and saying like, what is the amount of rest that I truly need each day to be my best? That's, I think, a different way of looking at it. Most of those people who say, 5.5 and I'm fine, yeah, they're functioning, but are they really doing the best that they could be doing?
You said only 1% do well with the 7 to 9. What are the other 99%?
Or somewhere in the 7 to 9 range.
Okay.
Yeah. So that 1% is both people, there's a few people in the universe, and, all of us, of course, wish we could do this, but who are truly thriving on less than 7 hours.
Less than, got it. Okay.
And then there's some in that 1% that need actually more, and maybe that's same. So
I need about 7, and Sam needs about more than that.
Yeah, I think the ripple effect of it is something that's so not thought about. It feels like a very personal thing. But I'm thinking about our kids now. Like, it's so obvious when they just can't function in the world because they're tired. My mom used to tell me that all the time when I was little, and it would make me so mad. But now that I'm a mom, it's so obvious to see it in them. Like their reaction time is quicker, like they're quicker to react negatively. Their resilience is gone. And so that little case study of witnessing that in a 4-year-old, it's like, well, that doesn't change when we're adults. We just showcase it differently. And man, the ripples are immense. I can only imagine. So we've talked a lot about like you can function, but you're not maybe thriving. And I think most people don't know the difference. So can you talk about like having gone through this yourself? What did you notice in yourself when you really paid attention to sleep?
One is, for example, what kind of foods do you crave? So as an example, when I was on business trips in other time zones and my sleep was totally out of whack and I was totally jet lagged, I would crave, of course, caffeine, which is fine, but I'd crave, sugar. I'd crave I'd eat croissant or something for breakfast, or I'd want a croissant as opposed to like having something healthier, like eggs or something. And so it certainly affects your eating choices just as one. I would say like feeling when I'm well rested, I'm certainly feeling better in whatever workouts or physical activity that I'm doing. Both having it take longer to feel exhausted, but also, reaction times and, coordination, all of those are improved with good rest. And I think the emotional piece is perhaps like the emotional and intellectual part of just being able to be highly productive when I'm really well rested and just get so much more done. And then also just having more patience with people around me and getting less irritated by the small stuff.
Yeah.
What's the science behind why it changes the structure of like what you crave or what you're eating? Like, why is that? Let's say you want to eat more bad food.
It has to do with your hunger hormones. When you're tired and you haven't gotten enough sleep, you're making less of a hormone that makes you feel satiated, and you're feeling more of a hormone that makes you feel hungry. So it's like a double whammy.
Wow.
Then there's also the resilience aspect of it again, right? I know the science states that the further you go throughout your day and the more you kind of just drain your mental capacity, the less resilience you have to make good decisions. Right? It's like at the end of the day, it's easier to like make a bad decision about what you're going to eat because you're just mentally drained, don't have that willpower anymore. Imagine that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
Another thing I was thinking about too is like you mentioned productivity. Like for those of us in the room who might be, procrastinators, do you think sleep impacts like that ability, like to actually, to your point, to be more productive, put work off, and be a little bit easier to be lax and to procrastinate?
To be a better procrastinator if you're rested?
To be a less of a procrastinator if you're rested?
I don't know. Tell me. I mean, you tell me. I mean, what do you think?
I have not solved this one yet. I'm still a world-class procrastinator. May not be a world-class sleeper as we're learning here, but yeah.
What do you struggle with the most? Like, do you have a hard time falling asleep at night?
No, not anymore. I sleep a lot better now than I did like when we first met. When we first met, I probably got about 4 hours of sleep.
Wow.
For years on end. Granted, I was probably indulging in too many of life's entertainment options out there, we'll call it.
You were on an eternal cruise.
Yeah. But I ended up marrying somebody who goes to bed 8:30 CNs.
All right.
And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do now? So started going to bed earlier, which has been helpful for me. But I think the main thing for me is something you mentioned, is like exercise. I get up early in the morning, I work out pretty hard, and then I find come about 9:30, I'm ready to sleep, ready to go to bed. And then I can fall asleep pretty quickly. Like for me, I wake up in the middle of the night. Like I'll wake up around 2. Sometimes I can go right back to sleep. Other times I'll wake up and I'm stressed or something's going on at work. Then like I'll sit there and
Ruminate.
Yeah, ruminate on that for an hour or 2. No more than 2. Typically fall asleep at about 4 if I'm up for those things. But
And then you wake up at 4:30 to work out.
yeah,
4:30. Wow. Impressive.
it has to be done at that time because the kids get up at 5:30 or 6. But yeah, that's what I found. Like I find that I'm a much better sleeper now. Could also be age and not indulging in those entertainment options.
So I have a question for you on this because he does wake up super early to work out. And looking at like my sleep data, as you mentioned earlier, my REM starts at like 5. and really goes from like 5 to 6:45-ish.
Coincidence, that's when you get to bed to yourself.
I mean, let the data talk, but I used to work out early in the morning. Motherhood has changed that in me, but apparently that's not just a me thing. The REM does come later. So like, we don't have data for Jason, but would you assume that he's getting REM with that routine? And if you had to choose between REM or working out, where would you put your emphasis?
I'm sure he's getting some REM. I mean, it'd be very interesting if you started tracking your sleep. I mean, this is a debate I used to have all the time when I was on the road with Google. It was like, do you get up at a crazy hour to get in a workout before the meetings begin? Or do you use that time and get more sleep? And I don't have an easy answer for it. Between the two of you, you might have first of all, you might have different chronotypes. So like you might be, maybe you're an earlier bird or maybe you're an earlier bird. I don't know. But generally all of us have like a genetic makeup that says whether we are, functioning at our best, like in our brain activity or in our workouts at certain times of the day. So you probably know some people, for example, who hate getting up for an 8 a.m. meeting, and they're the ones who are happy to go out after dinner and go out, till late at night. And then the flip-flop, the people who, have no interest in going out late at night and are happy to get up at 6 a.m. or maybe in your case, 4:30. So roundabout way of saying, like, I'm sure he's getting some REM. And is his REM suffering from the early morning? Potentially. I mean, if you're getting to bed early enough, maybe you are getting enough REM, but really the data would show. So it'd be worth tracking to see. And I think it's just that's a really tough trade-off.
Obviously, you have to train yourself to get up that early, right? That's not natural for anybody. I wonder, like, if, like, evolution or whatever it is states that as your body begins to learn and trains that, hey, you're getting up at 4:30, 4:45, does the body kind of begin to readjust and say, are you in sleep here? And does it start here? Because your body's beginning to learn that this is time to wake up. So, like, now, if I don't set my alarm for 4:30, I find that I wake up at like 5, and I'm like, oh, I feel pretty good. I can get up now. I could. Right. But I feel like the body has to learn to some extent.
That is like one of the most important takeaways for trying to get the best sleep possible is having the same wake up time as much as possible. Like whether it's a Saturday or a Tuesday. And that's hard for a lot of people because a lot of people like to sleep in on the weekends. Your body is learning, whether it's your 4:30 wake up or whether it's the 6, whatever it is, your body is learning. And it's really interesting because for me, I started playing hockey and I now have a lot of late night hockey games and it's just destroyed my regularity of my schedule. And it's just been an interesting takeaway.
So you have hockey games at 11 o'clock at night? Because
the latest ones are 10:30, but it's like, the game's an hour and then you're home and then you're wired. So it's brutal on sleep. So trying to have consistency is really important because to your point, your body kind of learns what its window is, what it's going to get.
Balance, yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. One of the things I found that I travel a lot for work as well. So if I take a late night flight and I get to my destination like at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, like I am just wired. Like last time that happened, I went out and took like a 30-minute walk to just kind of like bring myself down, came back, felt better. But it's wild how just doing something disruptive outside of your ordinary routine can like wire the brain. You mentioned this earlier. I know Andrew Huberman talks a lot about it and others, but like the importance of morning light.
Yeah.
Tell us about the science behind that.
And she doesn't mean your phone.
Yes, exactly. Natural. Like the importance of that. And I'm also curious to know like how you get that here in Montana.
Yeah, it's rough. I mean, especially when, for so much of the year, it's so late that we actually see the sunrise in the morning. But getting outside in the morning, even if it's cloudy, is super helpful if you can in like the first hour of your day. Light's important all the time, but I think one of the things that does it is sort of helping like set your circadian rhythm. So your body's like recognizing like, oh, it is morning, it is daytime. This is the time when I'm awake. And similarly, like you mentioned, business trips, that's one of the most important things if you're on, a different time zone, you're in a new place, trying to get light in that place's morning, getting outside or walking around and trying to kind of reset your circadian rhythm in that new time zone. So it's like you're training your body. It's sort of like getting into sort of a rhythm of understanding what's night and what's day. And similarly, like when is the right time to eat in that environment? So like even if you don't feel hungry in a new time zone because the hours of meals are completely off to what your body's used to, you're actually training your body by eating meals at the time that locals do to get into that schedule. So one of the best things you can do is like you went for a walk. I know it was late at night, but like if you're arriving, in the middle of the night or in the morning, like trying to get out and get outside and.
Does looking out the window count? Or are you saying like step outside?
Step outside. Try to be outside.
Okay.
Yeah.
So don't go straight from your hotel room to the ballroom to
Right.
the keynote. Yeah.
That's why Vegas is so dangerous. Because you never go outside. You're always in bright lights. You're always just like high stimulation.
Yeah. Okay. One thing that we talked about was waking up at the same time every day. Can you talk about the harm or not of snoozing your alarm?
When your alarm goes off, like your body releases cortisol, like, oh my God, it's time to get up. And then if you hit snooze and then your alarm goes off again in 2 minutes, you release cortisol again. So by the time, you're not getting like restful additional sleep in those additional few minutes. And so your body's just increasingly, releasing cortisol. And so it makes for sort of a jerky start to the day. And I wouldn't recommend it. Try if you can to get up when your alarm goes off. And if that doesn't work, like move your alarm across the room so you actually like have to get up to turn it off.
I read something recently along those lines. Like when you hit the snooze, you're telling your body that it's kind of like getting to go to the bathroom, right? When you go back to bed, you're telling your body it's time to go back to sleep. And your body is trying to find that stage of sleep that it just came from, whether that's REM or whatever. So it's trying to get back there again. And if you keep doing that over and over again, it's just going to make you more tired throughout the day. And it's not going to actually allow you to like wake up, get that initial jolt and that set going, but it's going to keep confusing your body, maybe to the point like you're talking about, it and just starts increasing cortisol. So I think that's a very interesting fact to consider. I'm guilty of that.
Let's bring this to the listener. If somebody is like, man, I am running on fumes right now. I need to make a change, but I don't know where to start. What's the most, like, you've mentioned a lot throughout this episode, but like most high leverage thing they could change that you think would make a difference? And maybe it's person to person, but
getting up at the same time 7 days a week, just trying that for a week and seeing how that goes.
Okay.
That would be like one first thing I would do.
Okay.
Second thing I would do is think about how do you spend that last hour before you go to bed? Are you on screens? Are you having, stressful conversations with your partner? Are you watching, thriller movies or whatever? I mean, even the news, like, don't do any of that. Try to think of what makes you calm, read an actual physical book. I know that sounds crazy, but trying to get away from screens and from things that are going to activate our brains in that last hour before bed.
As it relates to books, I've tried to find some stuff on this, but I can't find anything. But your thoughts on Kindles?
And the Kindle Paperwhite, you're going to ask me,
yes,
right?
We both have one, and that's what we do right before you fall asleep.
I read about it, and the supposed blue light on that is very minimal and low, but like I haven't found a whole lot of conclusive evidence on that. So love to hear.
Supposedly, the Kindle Paperwhite has less blue light, but it still has some. And so, if you can use real books, I would go that route. Well, it seems like you are sleeping really well, and you're using the Kindles now. Mm-hmm. But you're using the Kindle, and you're not sleeping well. So
I think I am. Varmin does nothing.
Depends on who you ask.
It's worth experimenting. Like, try going a week with like a physical, real book and seeing if that makes a difference. I mean, I'm all about, continuing to tweak, and it's a journey, and it's like, it's so hard to do all the things. I mean, as I've just basically confessed of all of my poor choices last night, but it's, I'm a human, and sometimes it's easy to become such a robot, like especially when you're thinking about sleep as work too. You're like thinking about it all the time. It's really easy to fall into a track of sort of being a robot about it. But
is it really like that world-class sleep we're trying to build towards? Like, do you find, you mentioned going to bed at the same time, physical books, all these things. How important is exercise to this? I think, should exercise be a part of the routine if you're trying to get that world-class sleep, or does that even matter?
It totally matters, and even better if it's outside, like we talked about earlier. Thinking about what time of day are you getting exercise? So you mentioned that you're getting it first thing in the morning, and that's fantastic. I think for some of us, doing it late at night within a few hours of bedtime interferes with sleep. And so I've certainly noticed that.
What would you say is the optimal time?
For some of us, it's like so much about jobs and families and trying to work around those. But if, let's say, you're retired and have all the time in the world and you're not taking care of young kids, your body has a different chronotype. And for some people, you feel the best physically in the morning. And for other people, it might be in the afternoon. So I'd say go with your chronotype of whenever you feel the best doing physical activity. It also feels like it's dependent on a lot of other things. If you like play basketball with other people or you play tennis, it might depend on when the games are. Yeah. So it's not always that sort of perfect, but if you do have total control, I'd say like, when does it feel most appealing to go to that yoga class or to go for a run or whatever it is? Because we're all different.
You have mentioned like many elements that we could change, and you've also mentioned the time frame of a week. My question is, how long does it take to really see if one of these elements is impacting your sleep? Is a week what you would suggest, or can you start to see results like immediately?
I mean, you might after 3 nights be like, oh, I have been trying to get up at 7 a.m. every morning, as opposed to my past life when I was getting up at different times all the time. And now I'm finding I'm waking up naturally right before my alarm. How amazing is that? And that could happen as soon as, 2 or 3 days after starting. A week is just sort of an arbitrary length of time that I was suggesting. But yeah, someone could start seeing benefits from any of these things in a shorter period of time for sure.
But more than a day.
More than a one-time wonder, yeah.
So if someone was trying to like move from getting up at 7 a.m. to 4:30, how long of a time frame would you say it's going to take for their bodies to kind of reset, reconfigure to that kind of time frame?
Well, they say that like if you were actually traveling, and you're not traveling, but if you were actually traveling, it's like a day for every time zone for your body to sort of catch up. And so that would be like several days of trying to get from the 7 to the 4:30. I mean, it's abrupt. I mean, that is quite early, but it sounds like your body is now adjusted and you're now going to bed early enough that you feel good, right?
Yeah, after about 5 years of doing it, I feel like the other day I woke up at like 5 and I was like, oh, I didn't set an alarm, but I still woke up. I was like, finally, 5 years in these. My body is ready to do this.
Okay, I want to take a little bit of a left turn question because I'm just fascinated about this, but you have run workshops for individuals, but also for companies. And I'm curious how that talk track has gone, because as we started the conversation, sleep is an afterthought for many people. But as we've discussed here, the impact on performance and leadership and everything that comes around it is immense. So when you've been like selling these workshops or your coaching or your courses, what does the ROI conversation look like for these companies?
Sleep is so connected to so many health-related issues. There's no question that if employees at an organization are getting a lot more rest, they're not going to have as many health-related issues, which means that it should impact healthcare costs of a company. And it should also impact sort of this idea of like presenteeism, or the idea that, employees are coming to work not feeling at full strength. Maybe they're coming to work with a cold, they're coming to work with some sort of an ailment, and they're just sort of getting through the day. Maybe they're multitasking and doing a million other things, and they're not really getting their work done. So they're sitting at their desk, but they're not really at their full potential. I mean, these things are really hard to measure and have, concrete data on. But there's like no doubt in my mind that an organization whose employees are well rested, that it's going to domino effect on so many other areas of health and performance, and therefore save a company money.
What's your thoughts on companies that have like nap pods or wellness rooms and stuff like that?
We had nap pods at Google. What was really interesting about them is that in some offices in some parts of the world, it was like they weren't used. And I think it goes back to that whole like work culture, busyness, sending emails at 2 a.m, this whole idea of like not wanting your colleagues to see you resting.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not everywhere, but this was just, I noticed this and talked with other teammates about this of like, why aren't these amazing nap pods getting used?
Yeah.
And I think, again, it's just about, how do we change the language around this so that people don't think you're slacking off because you're going and taking a short rest. I mean, being in there all day is a different story.
Sure. But 21 minutes and 30 seconds is acceptable.
How does he come to that number, by the way?
Well, they say 20 minutes is the kind of optimal time to nap, right? So that figure takes me about 90 seconds to truly like fall asleep, or to get to that place where I can, get there. And so I give myself that 90-second buffer to relax, get the pillow right, fall asleep. If the cat wants to come snug or whatever, we're ready to rock and roll. Let's go.
I'm just so fascinated by that. Like, for me to fall asleep in the middle of the day in 90 seconds, like, that's laughable. That will never happen. And also, he will fall asleep like in the living room on the couch while the kids are running around screaming and the dog's barking and the dishwasher's going.
It's a gift.
Wow. It's like that. Just, I could not. So
I do have one more question to sleep and like your thoughts on something. Like, what's your professional opinion on sleep aids?
Like a CPAP? Or
drugs. As a NyQuil or a Z-Quil, or they call it, or even
prescription stuff or melatonin,
THC, anything of the sorts.
Yeah, I am not a fan of really any of them. I know that for some people's having trouble with sleep can become a desperate measure and like definitely worth going to a doctor. And for a short period of time, a sleep aid might be the best thing to do. But generally, sleep quality is not as good with those sleep aids. In some ways, it's like the exercise versus REM question because it's like, which is worse? Is it worse if you are a total insomniac and you're getting like 2 hours of sleep a night? Is it worse to be there or is it worse to be having the impacts of an Ambien, for example? And so for some people in extreme cases, I think some of those sleep medications are like, it's like the last resort. But what I try to do is I try to work with people and try to think about all the behaviors that you could change first before getting to that, like as a last resort. Something like, there's a lot of discussion about pot and whether that's helpful. And for most people, it's helpful for them to fall asleep, but then it is disruptive of your sleep quality. In some ways, similar to how alcohol, makes it easier to fall asleep initially, but then your sleep quality is not as good. So yeah, once in a while, I think melatonin, which, you can get over the counter that can be helpful in terms of like shifting time zones. So let's say you have a big time gap in the country that you're going to. It can really help you to get to sleep those first couple of nights. But I really see it as like a very temporary thing.
Okay, so there's so many elements we should practice with first before resorting to
Sleep aids.
Yes. Okay.
I did find 10, 12 years ago when I was having really bad sleep and really troubles with sleeping, that when I tried to get sleep, I found that marijuana wasn't that actually would help me fall asleep and stay asleep, and I would get decent quality sleep. But I think it's also very relative and comparative to like what I was getting. Right, so it's like what I was able to get at that point. It was like I was literally like 4 or 5 hours a night, and I would just keep going on fumes. But then if I would ever want to like go to sleep at like 9 or 10, like a normal human being might, like that was the one thing that I found that would help. That was as close to natural as possible. I used air quotes there for those listeners.
Oh,
Wow,
okay.
I think the power just went off in our building.
It did. But our microphones are still ringing.
We're still going here. We're still live. The lights just went out everywhere. So we're podcasting in the dark. Friends of Denver.
So good to see you. Okay, well, this is fine. I had my last question here. You moved to Bozeman, Montana, recently. I'd be curious how living in an environment like this, which you lived in Hood River and whatnot before, which are both stunning places, but how has this impacted the way you think about rest and unplugging and what recovery actually requires of a person?
I guess one of the things that's interesting here is, and some of this is just a product of working for myself, but the idea that there's not a hard stop between Friday, my work life ending, and then Friday night is when my rest time happens. There's more blurring of the two. And part of that is like, okay, it's a lot more fun to ski at Bridger a few hours on a weekday when there's nobody there because the weekends are so crowded. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes I find that like a Sunday morning is actually a great time for me to be on my computer because I can actually get a lot of uninterrupted thought stuff done. So there's more sort of blurring to me of my weekday and weekend, which could probably happen anywhere. Mm-hmm. I think here people do prioritize more. Most of us are in Montana for a reason, and most of us take advantage of this spectacular place to get outside, enjoy all the Montana has to offer. So I think people really prioritize fitting that in as opposed to in some other, urban environments I've been in where they're indoors much more of the time and they're not putting as much of a prioritization. They get outside on like a Saturday morning and that's sort of the ball game.
Yeah. You shared so much great information here. If somebody wants to know more or follow you or find out how to work with you, all the things, where should we send them?
The best place to start is to go to my website, which is kristenrainey.com, KristenRainey. And there people can reach out to me and learn more about various sleep workshops and other programs that I have. So would love to connect with anyone who has any questions. I'm still really passionate about this topic, as you might have sensed. And Even though every night is not perfect, I do truly believe that being well rested has been so impactful for me on my life. So I would love to be able to help other people and being as rested as they can be.
I love that. And I will say you have expanded your work to beyond sleep now, but more like whole person performance and coaching. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm really enjoying working one-on-one with people. And I'm an accountability partner for a lot of people in terms of just like thinking about what they're eating, how they're getting exercise, and how they're thinking about all these behaviors in terms of their health and well-being, and in terms of, prioritization of things in their life, whether it's work or whether it's outside of work. So I work one-on-one with people, and then I'm also doing business consulting for local organizations here and really enjoying that too.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Friends, I hope you learned something. Go follow Kristen. I think there's so much to digest here, and I'm excited to hear from you on what's working and what you're learning. So be rested.